This tutorial is for Share Medical Center. I'll go over how to run a load test, perform a manual load test. So let's get started. First thing we want to do is go into the setup menu like we do with any other test, and go under select type, and then select monthly load test 45 minutes for your particular site. You have an ATS with a 45-minute retransfer delay, so we want to select 45 minutes and select all ATSs. We want to make sure that we check the initiate command through the user interface checkbox and select the correct ATS that we want to initiate the test, like so. Make sure that we name our report what we want. Make sure that everything is correct once you go through the setup, and once we go through the setup you'll see that the run button will become active. So we go ahead and click on run so that we can initiate the load test, and you'll see that the initiating ATS will not have the plus and minus bubbles right next to it. And that's because that's the initiating ATS. That's the one that's we're gonna send the transfer signal to it when we hit the run button, and you see there it's already been transferred over. Once it's transferred over and we see the generators running, we can go ahead and proceed with the next ATS by selecting the plus bubble, and just give it a minute for the ATS to transfer over. And just give it a moment longer, and there you go, transfer to emergency. Let's go ahead and proceed to the next one and wait for it to transfer. There you go, and we just follow through with this, doing the same thing with all the other ATSs. So we hit the plus bubble and wait for it to transfer over to emergency. As you can see, the generator's running, everything's running. And keep in mind, the reason why we're doing this is because we are seeing some errors with data loss errors with your system due to some IT issue. So this is a good way to avoid having problems with your reports once those data communication errors are present. In this particular test, we didn't see that those errors actually came up, which is a good thing. That leads me to believe that the problem is no longer present. And if that's the case, then you can go ahead and proceed with a normal load test as you would in any other situation. And that basically, the only difference is you won't see those bubbles, and you don't have to hit the plus or minus signs at all. So now, once we wait a full minute for the system to stabilize and work for a little bit, we'll start recording data, and you'll see that the countdown will start as soon as the time, the 1 minute time elapses, as you see there. And that's what you're seeing there. The time has started. Now you'll notice that I hit the minus sign on ATS equip. And the reason why I did that is because that ATS has a 45-minute retransfer delay. So we want to hit the minus sign right away, and in order for it to transfer at the 45-minute mark. Now I'm going over to the Detroit Diesel system. We want to run the test at the same time. That way, we can get this done as quickly as possible. So here I'm going to generate the Detroit Diesel, And this ATS has a transfer delay of only 30 minutes. There's only one ATS tied to this system. So that's why I select monthly load test 30 minutes. Just go ahead and, yeah, 30 minutes. Make sure the report name's okay, the email's okay, there's no pre-test checklist items. Make sure everything's good. You see the run button come active, just hit run. Once everything is set up, and you'll see that in a moment that the generator will turn on, and then the ATS will transfer over. And in this case, we don't have to worry about clicking on any bubbles or anything like that, since it's the only ATS attached to this system. So all we have to do is just set up the test like we normally would any other test, and hit run, and that should do it. That should do it. So let's just give it a moment here for it to actually transfer over, for this ATS to actually transfer over. You can see that the generator is already running. Everything is looking good, and there you go. We have connected to emergency and emergency available for this ATS. So we can actually just leave this system as is and move on with the other system if you need to, since there's more stuff going on over there. There's more things that we have to look at. We can just go ahead and transfer back to the other system if need be. So here we are back in the main system, and you can see that we are already at about the 30-minute mark, and there's already a few ATS that I've already went ahead and hit the minus button, as you can see there. And the reason why I'm doing that is because those have a 30-minute retransfer delay. So again, we're releasing the remote test signal on these ATSs every time we hit the minus button, and then the ATSs themselves have their own timer associated with them. So we know that some of these have a 30-minute retransfer delay, others have a 20-minute retransfer delay, others have a 10-minute retransfer delay. So that's why you can see that the time at which I'm hitting these minus buttons varies. ATS Equip, I believe, has a 45-minute retransfer delay, so that's why it was the first one that I went ahead and retransferred. But each ATS has their own associated onboard timer, and what I'll do is I'll go ahead and provide you guys with a list of what those times are, so that way you know at what time you have to go into Blue Pillar and hit that minus button. So that way the test doesn't extend itself to an unnecessary 2 hours because of the onboard delay or the built-in delay of each ATS. And here you can see ATS CR01 has a 1-minute retransfer delay. So around the 1-minute mark, what I'll do is I'll hit the minus bubble there. Okay, yeah, we hit the minus bubble there, and it should take about 1 minute for it to transfer back. And here I'm going back to the other system just to make sure that everything went well. And then we see that the test is over on the Detroit Diesel system, and here we're just waiting a little bit for the test to time out and for all the ATSs to start transferring back. You'll also notice that ATS EQ02 never got transferred, and the reason for that is because it's a manual ATS, so that's not included in our test. Manual ATSs are not part of the reporting process. They are part. I mean, we are monitoring it. We monitor the voltage, amperage, all that good stuff. But we will not send a test signal to this ATS simply because it's not an automatic ATS. It's a manual ATS, and As you can see on the screen, the ATSs are beginning to come back to normal state. So let's just we can wait a few more minutes and wait for them for all of them to completely transfer back to normal source, to normal power source. Okay, so here we can see that all the ATSs transferred back to normal power source. The generator is in cool down process, so it's going to take a few minutes for it to come to a complete stop. So we just got to give it a few minutes and allow for it to, shut down on its own. And what you'll realize, or what you'll see when you run the main system test and the Detroit Diesel system test, or load test rather, what you'll notice is that the Detroit Diesel test would have already been completed, done, and finalized by the time this one actually is over. So even though I don't show it here on my screen, the Detroit Diesel system has already completed its process, and looks like everything went well. Again, this is something that needs to get done whenever there's this IT issue. For this particular test, there wasn't an issue. There was no data loss errors. So if there are no data loss errors when you attempt to run the test, then you can run the test as you normally would without having to hit those plus and minus bubbles. But yeah, this pretty much concludes the test of both systems. Thank you very much.